This year, 2025, marks kind of a significant milestone for me in my worship leading journey. It was 20 years ago this year, actually, in January of this year, 20 years ago, that I began my worship leading journey. And what would current day Curtis tell 20 years ago, Curtis? Stick with me and let's dive into these top 12 things that I've learned over the past 20 years. Well, welcome to the Curtis Biswell Show. It's been a few months, sadly, and since I last posted anything. If you are new to checking out the Curtis Biswell Show, and you're just curious, what is this guy about? What is his content about? Well, my vision is to cultivate a thriving community where worshipers are raised up in character, competence, and cognitive health. Just recently, I was chatting with a local church staff, and Psalm 78, 72 is a big part of their mission and their hiring process to different members. And I just my heart really knitted with that because that verse is so influential, or has been so influential to me over the past several years. And it says this, like I've referenced this in other episodes, but it says that God took David from shepherding his sheep to shepherding his people. I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have it in front of me. And he did this primarily in two ways: with character, or with integrity of heart, and a skillful hand. So the correlation there is the integrity of heart is the character that is being produced in us and that was being produced in David. But then that skillful hand is really equally important. I mean, some may err on the side of, oh, well, bless their heart. They have a great heart, but that shouldn't be all that there is to leading others, to investing in others, to developing others, to pastoring others. That skillful hand, or what we call those competencies and growing in your craft, is very important. I thought, what better way than kind of a 20 year milestone to do some reflecting. So I took some time and I reflected on my past 20 years and what were some of the big things that I've learned. I made a list. I started out to make a list of 10, my top 10 things that have been very influential, that I've learned over the past 20 years. But it was hard to keep it to just 10. So I've expanded this to my top 12 things. I'll probably divide this into two episodes since the list is 12. So I just started writing these down, and they're in no particular order of importance. So I'm just going to start going through these, and some I will expand upon quite a bit. Some I will point to other episodes, or at least you can go back and look through some of my other episodes, because some of these I've devoted full episodes to where I kind of go into a deeper dive. But point number one is, don't be afraid of or resistant to the click track. Now, I'm probably going to lose some of you here, and please just stick with me, because this is such a I've picked up over the years, this becomes kind of a hot topic of debate, and it becomes kind of divisive, and that's not my intent. But uh, for me, I'm a big why guy, and if you know your why, then it will inform your what. And so I always try to attach a why to everything that I do. And so I want to take some time here just to kind of unpack that a little bit, because you may be very resistant to it. I've heard things like, well, it takes the spirit out of worship. It is very distracting. We can't just focus on leading others or worshiping the Lord because there's something that's distracting us in our ear. Those are just a couple of many. Um, and for the first several years or few years, I can't remember exactly when we started, but I would guess the first almost 7 years of my worship leading journey, I was resistant to it. In fact, I still remember to this day, I had a buddy of mine that came in and filled in playing drums for us one Sunday. It was my very first church that I was at, Rosedale Church. Shout out to my Rosedale peep. Shout out to my Rosedale people. In fact, I just saw some of those people at my brother-in-law's wedding a few weeks ago, and there was one of the guys that went to church with us. He had coined the nickname for the worship team or the worship band, Kurt Boogie and the Funky Bunch. So shout out to Casanova for that. Um, but so those first few years, first several years, cutting my teeth in leading, trying to grow in my character and my competence. And I remember, so I brought in a buddy one time. He happened to be in town, and he's a phenomenal musician, singer, drummer. And so I said, "Hey, would you come and play drums for us? We don't have a drummer for this coming Sunday." So he came, and I remember specifically him saying, "Now, do you want me to turn the click on in my ears?" So he was the only one with in ears because he was back in the drum cage. He said, "Do you want me to throw a click in, and you guys just follow me?" I said, "Yeah, that'd be great," because like that seemed like the musician thing to do. That seemed like, okay, well, yeah, that would be good for us to have something that we're playing to, and then we'll just follow you. This was a very humbling experience. I remember getting really mad because we were rushing it, and I felt like he was dragging as a drummer. And, what I thought I knew and how I thought I could keep good enough time by myself, when it was put in line with the truth, if you will, just hang with me, the consistent of a metronome, I could not play with it. I could not play to it. And it was so frustrating. So we just said, let's go away from it. And he was gracious with that. And he just kind of followed us. But enter in a few years later, my worship band and I went into the studio to set out to record a worship album. And that was an interesting experience for many reasons, which I won't dive into in this episode. But like, for one, like we had to play to a click in the studio. So we could chop up our parts, and then the producer could go back and copy and paste, or all that stuff. And so it's just something that my next church that I landed at, I said I am going to implement this, and I'm done with being afraid of it myself. And I put in the work myself, and I made myself play to one and get confident with it and get used to it. And then it just became the standard going forward for the teams I would lead from there on out, because what I noticed is it increased our musicianship. People that we would bring in, I remember bringing in this new drummer, very young kid, very green, and he struggled right away with it. But he put in the work and he put in the time, and he became one of my most dependable drummers. He wasn't the most flashy, he wasn't the most skilled, but he learned to play in time, and was very open to correction and to coaching. So I delved in a little deeper than that I thought I would on that, but the importance of playing with a click is something that I wish I would have started from day one. Number two, know your why. This, again, it's extremely important to know your why. Again, it was probably about 7 or 8 years into my leading that I even got to a point to where, okay, you know what, we have no music team documents or a worship handbook of sorts. And so I started asking around, asking my other worship leading friends, doing a lot of Googling and seeing what other churches put in place. And I then formed, after a lot of research and prayer, I formed what became my own music team documents, or my why. And what was so impactful and powerful about this and important was the team was starting to grow. It was starting to onboard people. People were coming forward. The church I was at the time was growing. It was still pretty young, but there was a lot of newness to it. And so it was growing. I don't remember if we were like 300 to 400 people at the time, which is a decent size for a church that's only 2 or 3 years old. And so people started expressing interest like, "Hey, I sing," or "Hey, I play an instrument," or "Hey, I can run sound," and so they start expressing interest to join the team. Well, prior to that, I didn't really have much in place of how to onboard somebody because I didn't have the things laid out. Like, what are the things that are important to us as a music team? And so by that, what was so important to have those in place, because not only do you have your mission and your vision and your values, but then you have broken down per each instrument the desired skills you're looking for. And here's what really this comes into play. This is where this really comes into play, is then it becomes less subjective when you audition somebody, and they don't if they aren't aligning with any of those things, whether it's a desired skill, like more technical in an instrument related thing, or even some of the values, like we value communication and letting us know if you can't make it, things like that, or we value chemistry, like we're here to like gel with one another, and no egos are going to be getting in the way, like if you have those in place, then it becomes less subjective of like, well, Curtis told me yes because he must like me, or Curtis told me no because he must not like me. No, if I said no, it's here's why. This is what we need to work on first. And I always would try to lead with a yes, and I never gave a hard no. I would always give an opportunity to like work with them if they weren't quite where we needed them to be. And that's a wide range of things, but then you could try to give them something to work on and then follow back up. But having a clear sense of why, so mission, what is your mission as a worship team? I would suggest you craft that for your team, and it should align with the mission of your church. And then what do you value? Like, are you pointing your feet as a team? And then what are the values like? And so I had a few different ones. In fact, you can go to my website and check out the free resource of music team documents, or worship team handbook. I forget exactly what I titled it. And like you can download that for free, and it could at least inform your way of thinking and crafting your own. Number 3, 2 Timothy 2:2. I just called this one a scripture, and then I'm going to unpack it. This became a very impactful scripture for me in my ministry. And not just that, it became very impactful in the discipleship culture that we had at the church at the time. And the things that you have heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. And so what's so interesting and powerful with this one verse, 2 Timothy 2:2, is there's a 4 generation thing playing out here. Okay. So you have Paul. Paul is the mentor in this passage. He's writing to the person he's mentoring, Timothy. So you have Paul, you have Timothy, but it doesn't stop there. It says, the things you've heard me say, commit these to faithful men. And there's a key to that. Not just any men or any person, but faithful men, or I like to say people of peace, like commit it to faithful men who then will be able to teach others also. So Paul, Timothy, faithful men, others. And so the main thing that I wanted to dive into here, though, is we have to put ourselves in the Timothy seat. And so constantly and regularly, who is to your left? Who is the Pauls in your life? And who's to the right? Who are the faithful people, the faithful men? And you should be giving adequate time to both. So for me, how this played out is I began to reach out to older worship leaders, or at least worship leaders that have been leading a few years more than me, or people I had looked up to in the area. And doesn't have to just be in your area. And I would reach out to them. I said, hey, could I buy you coffee, or could I buy you lunch? And I would write down questions. and I would go to them and I would just ask them questions. And man, I learned so much from that. And so I would even divide that into a couple different areas. I think spiritual mentors are always going to be important, and that could be your pastor. It could be an elder of your church. It could be your dad. It could be somebody further along in the faith. Those are always going to be important to have in your life. But I'm mainly in this context talking about lane leaders. So, in your lane of leadership, find those because they will be able to give you that mentorship specific to your lane of leadership. And then on the right side, because you don't want it to terminate with you. If you go and ask a bunch of questions to people you look up to, you gain a lot of knowledge and maybe it informs how you lead. So to say it terminates there or it's not of any value, I'm not saying that, but it would not be as beneficial as it could if you don't then pass that along to others. So then the faithful men come into play. Who are people, not just competent people, but people with character and competence that express a hunger to learn. And they're also reliable. Your words ring big in their ears. That's how I like to say it. Because sometimes we confuse people of proximity with people of peace, meaning, okay, well, this person is on my team. He plays a guitar and sings, so he must be the person I'm supposed to invest in and raise up to be the worship leader. He checks all those boxes. But what's their character like? Are they dependable? Do they lead with integrity? Do they do what you ask them to do? Or another good sign, are they coming around and asking, hey, how can I help? That's a really big one, pretty easy. Okay. They keep asking me how they can help. Maybe they are a person of peace. Maybe they are a faithful person that I can then give more leadership away to. So that is something that's been extremely powerful over the years, and I wish I would have learned it even earlier in my years of leadership than I did. Number 4, strive to be a month out in scheduling of people or your team, and also picking your songs. Now, again, I'm afraid I'm going to lose some of you here. You're like, man, how am I going to do that? Because wouldn't that squelch the spirit, and wouldn't that just be too programmatic and too structured, and then you don't leave any room for the spirit? Or another one I hear quite a bit too, well, my pastor, he doesn't give me what he's talking about until Thursday or until Saturday. I've even heard that. One thing from one of the mentors that I started meeting with that has always stuck with me over the years is he said it to him over the years of his worship leading to plan a good worship set. I know that sounds very subjective, was more important and had more value than picking a set that went perfectly thematically with the sermon. So again, there may be preference there. There may be, I don't know if I agree with that. My point is though, if you can learn, and I picked a month. I know some people that are 3 months out. I know one church right now, they have the rest of the next 2 years planned out of what they're talking about. And they said that's not very characteristic for them, but it's just so happened to be, they had this year planned out and then the series for the next year as well. You know, I love that kind of stuff, but I'm not saying everybody's going to be that way. And I'm not saying, here's the thing you need to note. Just because you plan something out doesn't mean you can't deviate from it. So I hope that debunks some of the myth of structure versus spirit driven, because the spirit, another worship mentor friend of mine, Troy Kennedy from Westside, one of the things that's always stuck with me is he said, the spirit is in the planning. When did we think that planning and trying to get out in front of things and be a few months ahead, when did we think that that was less spiritual and that the spirit isn't in that? The spirit has given you a brain. He's given you a gift to be creative and to plan. So why would we be so arrogant to say that the spirit that is not spiritual to be several months out? So I just picked about a month, and I found for me that's a good framework. If I'm a month out, and I do it in two layers. I schedule out people first, because then my songs come second. Sometimes it will depend on who I have playing and singing, will then also kind of depend what kind of songs I will do or what we will do. And I have way more things that go into song selection, but that's for other episodes. But if I've found that if I can be a month out in my scheduling and a month out in my songs, then it frees you up week to week then to be more pastoral or to do some of these other things. But if you're continually week by week getting bogged down in the scheduling and the planning of songs, it slows you down from some of the other things you can be doing. And a lot of worship leaders I know, they're very part-time, or they're bivocational, or they even just volunteer at their church. All the more so, their time is valuable and it's limited. So if they could spend one half day or whatever to get out in front of the scheduling and the picking of songs, then they could free up the rest of their weeks. I hope that makes sense. But that was just a big takeaway for me, and something that's been very impactful is to kind of have that month out um, rhythm. Number 5, become a reader and have a healthy balance of the 4 L's. Again, some of you may be like, but Curtis, I don't read. I'm not a reader. I mean, I read my Bible, but that's not my jam. It's not how I'm wired. Uh, so don't hear this as some legalistic, like, okay, well, if you're not a reader, then you're going to not be a great worship leader. I'm not saying that in any way. But what I've found, because honestly, guys, I mean, I read some in grade school, but throughout high school, college, I mean, I would read what I had to for my classes, but you never saw me picking up a book to read. That just wasn't my jam. I'd rather be out listening to music or playing sports or hanging out with friends or going out to eat, like watching television, watching movies. But reading, no, it's not me. But it was about 2017 that our staff at the church really started making this assertive effort to become readers and to become learners. And that's what I believe. I believe that learners are leaders or readers. I think I've said that different, but I believe if you are reading, that is one main way to really to increase your leadership lid. And so every year since 2017, I've made it a goal I've set a reading goal for each year. Now, some years I would hit it. Most years I fell short. But here's the thing, like, even if I set a goal for 20 and I read 15, that's still way more than I ever read in the previous years. And so then I would like, okay, well, maybe I need to adjust my goal down. And these last couple of years, I've set the highest goals that I've ever set, and I actually have hit them. And I've learned a lot because I have this healthy balance of the 4 L's. So here's what I mean by the 4 L's. Number 1, because I needed a fourth L. I usually had 3 L's, but I needed a fourth L. So lordship. What do I mean by that? Like these are spiritual growth books. Okay. Other than the Bible, you should always be reading, hands down. Don't get an excuse for that. Don't get a pass for that. But in addition to that, what are some books that that will increase your knowledge of your spiritual practices or your disciplines or finding out more about God? There's so many good ones out there. L number 2, though, is lane. So what area are you? Are you a worship leader? Are you a pastor? Are you a youth leader? Um, Whatever your lane of leadership is in ministry, pick some books of people that are in that lane. So for me, worship leadership, there's lots of great worship leading books out there. Bob Coughlin, Worship Matters, one of the biggest staples. I could go on and on. But find those books and make those a rhythm. Make sure that the books you're reading in a year um, encompasses a lane. So lordship area, a lane area, a leadership. So leadership would be more global of like leading others, and there's probably some correlation between lane and leadership, but leadership is just always good to have some of those, like of how to lead others, and to develop others, invest in others. Because if you've been put in charge of a ministry, you are the pastor of that ministry, you're the leader of that ministry, and so how can you continually to grow in your leadership lid? And then the last L is leisure. Again, like if reading's not your jam, then maybe you don't have as many of these. But I would say also have one or two books a year that it's just for fun, because it's still getting you to read more. It's getting you off um, the social media. It's getting you off of so much video or TV consumption, like because I think that can be unhealthy in its own right if we have so much of that. So, what's a leisure? And this sounds kind of silly, but for me, I've started picking up some old Hardy Boy books that I read as a teenager, and I'll throw those in and I'll read one or two of those a year. And it's kind of nostalgic, but it's just something that's just more for entertainment. Number 6, develop a rhythm of rest. Man, this is extremely important. If I was ranking these in order of importance, it would probably be a lot higher than number 6. Man, the ministry monster will devour everything you feed it. That's something. So, I mean, I've been in worship leadership ministry in all forms, very volunteer, full time, raising my support. So, lots of different contexts. Um, but arguably, I've been in ministry for all my life because I've been a preacher's kid all my life. And so I've seen a lot of what goes on in and out of the church in ministry, and just observing how ministry is so demanding. And if you're not careful, your family gets second best in your life. And so developing rhythms of rest will help you to prioritize what matters in life, and it will help you lead healthy and not and lower the chance of burnout. That's one of the biggest things we see with ministry leaders is burnout. I mean, you could argue you see moral failure, but what's the correlation of um, being too busy that plays into even that, if you think about it. So these rhythms of rest, and I think it was Rick Warren that coined this. I couldn't find that for sure, but I think he had three different things, and I added a fourth because I thought the fourth thing was equally important. Is this: divert daily. Number 2, withdraw weekly. Number 3, retreat quarterly. So that's the fourth one I added. So it doesn't really go with the RR, like the other was the same letter. And then number 4 was abandon annually. So what I mean by that: divert daily, like find a daily quiet time, find a rhythm, and let's not be legalistic here. Like what's the best part of your day? Is that early morning before everybody else is up? Is that late at night when everybody else is asleep? What's the best part of your day? Divert daily. Find the best part of your day and get alone with the Lord, whether that's just through prayer or scripture reading or both, or meditation or scripture memorization, or just sitting and being quiet and just listening to the Lord. But divert daily. Number 2, withdraw weekly. Find a weekly Sabbath rhythm. This is extremely important. Like whatever, and it can't be just a day off. Now, this gets sticky because a lot of people is like, man, I work 6 days a week, and so how am I going to do this? Like, this is where it's tricky, but you have to prioritize it, and you have to find what's going to work for you, because it can't just be a day off. This needs to be your personal Sabbath where you are abstaining from work, you're resting from work, and you're spending extra time with the Lord. maybe even extra time with your family, but there's no work involved. All right. So, like, what does that look like in your weekly rhythm? Number three, this is the one I've added because I think a month or a quarterly, I like quarterly, 4 times a year. For me, how I did this was fifth Fridays. It was just easy to kind of remember. Every fifth Friday, I was going to plan out a personal retreat day. And it doesn't have to be, I go way far away, but just something intentional where I get away from the daily rhythm. And it's not a Sabbath, but it's a retreat day, and I spend some time with the Lord, but I'm also spending some time thinking and praying and planning. Maybe it's looking ahead and like looking, observing some of the goals I've set for that year, and then what needs tweaked, and what are some benchmarks to, like, if I have these goals, and what's some benchmarks to help me continue to hit those goals. So like that retreat, personal retreat day is extremely important rhythm of rest. And then number four, abandon annually. Take some time every year to get away for 2 or 3 weeks. Maybe that is more of a personal vacation with your family, but you're unplugging from work and you are taking a mini vacation, or you're taking a vacation. And then I didn't even add in here, but then what does a sabbatical look like in your rhythm? So statistically, most church leaders every 7 years, you can take a sabbatical, and that's extremely important. And so sabbatical, I would suggest do nothing less than 3 months, maybe even as much as 6 months. That there's a lot of parameters that what your church allows you to do and what they can pay you to be away for. And but that's something I didn't even put in here. But rhythms of rest. Thanks for checking out episode 1 of this 2-part episode of my reflections over the past 20 years and some of the things that have been the most influential for me and my worship leading journey and leadership. And so stay tuned for episode 2 coming out here shortly. And if you'd like to find out more, is go to my website, curtisbiswell.com, and find out ways that I could serve you in your church and help empower your leaders to take your next steps of growth. So see you on the next episode. God bless.